today's video, we are going to be learning about the different selection tools and then how to make layers out of a selection that we have made on our current pick. We will also revisit the Move tool and the Transform tool. And finally, we will learn about the Crop tool. So to practice this, we are going to be playing an operation type game. And in that game operation, you have to use the tweezers to pick out certain body parts without touching the human body. And so today, we're going to be picking out parts of a picture using selection tools, and then we're going to be moving those parts. Welcome to Operation Vegetable. So if you don't already have this photo up in Photoshop, I want you to make sure that you go over to Schoology to the 3-1 video tutorial. Scroll all the way to the bottom where I have given you the selection tools.psd start file. Make sure that you download and save as selection tools PSD to your OneDrive Triton folder, into graphic design, and into Unit 3. And then go ahead and open that bad boy up. It should look like this in Photoshop. So our goal today is to make each one of these vegetables and the cutting board into its own specific layer, and then take all the vegetables and move them onto the cutting board. And we'll have to do some transforming along the way.
Now our first group of selection tools we're going to practice using are the marquee tools. They're in the upper left-hand corner. And remember that the little arrows mean there are always more tools hiding underneath. So if I click and hold this marquee tool, I actually see that there's a rectangular marquee, an elliptical marquee tool, single row, and single column. We're going to start by using the rectangular marquee tool. And all you need to do to use this is click and drag. So let's practice by using the rectangular marquee tool to select the cutting board. So I'm going to go up to the very edge where I see this crosshair, and I'm clicking my mouse and dragging down. And notice that I can tell this area is selected because I see these dotted lines, or sometimes they're called marching ants because they're moving around like little ants.
And the big thing to know about selection tools is they kind of work like layers. Anytime something is selected, you can only edit what's selected. So if I went over to my brush tool and I tried to paint outside my selection, nothing's going to show. If I paint inside my selection, it's going to paint anywhere up until those dotted marching ants lines. So I'm just going to take my history panel and step back here until I have my selection. And at this point, I want to take that cutting board and I want to make it its own layer. So always first start by selecting the part you want to make its own layer, which we've done. And then it's as simple as copying and pasting. So I'm going to use the shortcut key for copy, which is Control C. And then when I go to paste and use the shortcut key for paste, which is Control V, you're going to see that in your layers panel, you have a new layer from what you've selected. And if I turned off visibility on the background layer, I would see just my cutting board. And remember, we always want to double click and rename our layers what they are. So just to review, you should have used the rectangular marquee tool to select the cutting board, and then you should have copied and pasted to make that selection its own layer, which you then should have renamed. At this point, if you hide the visibility of the cutting board, you'll see that you still have the cutting board on the background layer. So what you can do is you can either leave it or you can delete it. So if you want to delete it, again, use one of your selection tools to select that area, and then simply use the delete key, not backspace, but delete on your keyboard. And it should bring up a box like this. And it's going to ask you, how do you want to fill that selection? We want to take this drop-down menu and make sure that you fill it with white, and then click OK, and you'll see that the cutting board is now gone from your background layer. But if you turn the visibility back on your cutting board layer, you have moved that cutting board to its own separate layer. Now, one thing we need to do right now is deselect on our background layer. And there are a couple different ways that we can deselect.
The first, as long as I've still got a selection tool up here picked out in my toolbox, I could click anywhere outside of the selection and it would deselect that area. Otherwise, if I've got a selection made, I could right click and choose deselect. Or our third option is to use the shortcut key, which in this case is holding down Control and then deselect art with D, and that would deselect.
So we can turn our visibility back on our cutting board layer so we can see that. And now we're going to start moving our vegetables. And the next marquee tool we're going to practice using is the elliptical marquee tool. So go ahead and press down on that marquee until you choose elliptical. And we need to make sure that in order to select the tomato, We are on the background layer since the tomato is on the background layer. So remember, always make sure you're on the layer you're editing. And right now we're selecting or editing from the background layer. So I'm going to start on my background layer with my elliptical marquee tool.
And now one neat trick about using an marquee tool is that, let's say I am clicking and dragging, and right now I can make ovals, I can make circles, whatever. Let's say I want to make a perfect circle. If I press and hold shift while I'm dragging, I'm going to make a perfect circle. I can't make an oval, but if I let go of shift, I can do whatever. So in the case of the tomato, it's a pretty perfect circle. I'm going to try to click and use shift when I'm drawing. Now, I did start in the corner, but I'm really far off on my tomato here. I've got a lot of white space. Instead of having to kind of guess where the corner is every time and hope that I get a good selection, we can freeze our selection while we're drawing it by using the space key. So even if I started way over here and I'm drawing my selection and I'm off, if I press and hold space before I let go of my mouse, I can move that selection and I can still resize that. Using that space bar trick to freeze our selection while we're drawing it is nice if you don't want to have to keep just redrawing your circles. So do go ahead right now and use the elliptical tool to select your tomato.
And once you have that selection, to make a new layer of the selection, simply copy, so Control C, and paste, Control V, and you're going to see that it's its own new separate layer that we can double click to rename. So now that we have the tomato on its own layer, we can move that onto the cutting board. So make sure that you're on the tomato layer. And then again, remember the move tools, this 4-pointed arrow. So click that, and then you just have to click and drag the tomato to where you want it on the cutting board. If you're not seeing the tomato on the cutting board when you move it, double check in your layers panel that your tomato is on top of the cutting board. If it's not, remember you have to click and drag the order so that the highest item is the one you want to see on top. So now that I have tomato on top, I can move it around. And if my tomato is too big, because it's its own layer, I can do any edits I want without ruining the cutting board layer. So I can do Control P to transform my tomato just a little bit. Then remember, check or deny your transformation. And see how I still have some white there? If I don't want that white, I can zoom in and I can go in and I could erase the white on my tomato layer. And again, I'm not hurting that cutting board layer at all, because the cutting board is its own layer. So make sure you get your tomato back to your cutting board and transform it to any size you want.
Our second group of selection tools are right underneath the marquee tools, and they're called the lasso tools. So again, if I click and hold, I have a regular lasso, a polygonal lasso, and a magnetic lasso tool. The regular lasso tool is a freehand selector, so I can just click and it's anywhere my mouse goes is the selection. That's not really that easy to use, so we're not going to use it to move any vegetables. It's just kind of so you know that's there. Second one is this polygonal lasso tool. The polygonal lasso tool puts down what I call fence posts wherever you click the mouse. So if I click the mouse here, it's going to put down a little post, and then it draws a straight line in between any post that I click to put down. So if I click again, there's a straight line. Wherever I click, putting down little fence posts. And notice if I want to close my selection, I have to go back to the beginning, and a little circle will appear to tell me that yes, that is a closed selection. If I go down and try to select the carrot with the polygonal lasso tool, it's kind of hard because the only thing I'm getting is a straight line in between each fence post, and the edges of a carrot aren't perfectly straight. So instead of using the polygonal lasso tool, we're going to go and we're going to actually try to use the magnetic lasso tool, the very last one. So click and hold on the lasso tool, go down to magnetic lasso tool. And the magnetic lasso tool works in the same way that a magnet works. It's going to cling to the edge of a picture just like a magnet clings to metal. And it has fence posts like the polygonal lasso tool. So you click on your starting fence post, and then you're just dragging your mouse, like drawing around. And even see how my mouse is up here? It's finding that edge, and it's just clinging to the edge. And it puts down fence posts for me, or I can click when I go around a corner and can put some down. Now, see how I just lost the tip of the carrot there? Or maybe I went way too far this way. If I did that, I can press backspace, and it will delete my fence post, and then I can just keep going until you hit the end. So if it's hard for you to see the little circle at the end, a cool trick is to just double and it'll automatically finish your selection for you.
So once you've used your magnetic lasso to select your carrot, make sure that you're on your background layer and go ahead and copy and paste to get your carrot as its own layer. Rename that, move it around in your layers panel if you need to, and then grab your move tool and move your carrot up into your cutting board wherever you want. And if you want to transform it and rotate and resize it somewhere on your cutting board, that is fine as well.
This group of selection tools, the wand tools, and it's actually the quick selection tool and the magic wand tool. And both of these make selections based similar to the magnetic lasso, except they cling to areas of similar color and edges. The magnetic lasso is usually just like the edge of a picture. The quick selection and the magic wand tool find areas of similar color. Let's start with the magic wand tool. And one thing I do want you to note is up here on the tool options bar, we have this number for a tolerance. The higher the tolerance, the more similar shades of that color. So if I'm going over to try to select the lettuce, all I would need to do is click once, and it's going to find any shade of green that's within 75 shades of where I click. So if I wanted actually more greens, let's say I want to try to get the whole thing, I could up my tolerance. I'm going to try like 100. If I deselect and now I click my lettuce again, it grabbed almost all of it. If you don't want to keep going back and forth between guessing and increasing your tolerance or lowering your tolerance, one way to add to your selection is to press and hold the shift key. And as I'm pressing and holding it, my magic wand comes up with a little plus. So that means anywhere where I now click, it's going to add that plus to my selection. So go ahead, use that magic wand tool to select your lettuce.
Once again, making sure we're on the background layer, do a copy paste to get our lettuce on its own layer, move it above the cutting board, rename it, and then you should be able to use your move tool to move that bad boy onto our cutting board. You will have to transform this to make it fit. Again, you can rotate it, you can even overlap vegetables if you want to do that, and you should be good.
So our final magic wand tool, and it's my favorite selection tool, is the quick selection tool. And you see when I select it right away, it looks like a little circle with a plus. And if I look on the tool options bar, I can either increase the size of that by sliding this bar. Now I've got a really big plus, or I could decrease the size of it by going that way. Or simpler way without having to go up to the tool options bar is to press the right bracket key to increase or the left bracket key to decrease. Now the size of your plus is how big the size of the color selection is going to be. So if I have a really big plus, it's going to select that much in one click pretty much. Okay, if I have a really small plus, it's going to only select a little bit in that one click. And the quick selection tool, all you have to do is you click and drag, and it quickly selects for you. If you click too much, so now I got way too much over here, you can press and hold the Alt key, and it turns into a minus, and then you can drag the areas you don't want until you get a perfect selection.
And once you have your yellow pepper selected, again, copy, paste. It should be its own layer that you can move around, you can rename, and then you should be able to take that yellow pepper and drop it onto the cutting board. Again, feel free to transform as you desire. And so now the only vegetable you should have left to put on your cutting board are, I think, water olives in the right-hand corner. I don't know, I don't eat a lot of vegetables. And that's gonna be a free-for-all. So you can use whichever selection tool that you would like to use to select the olives, and then make sure that you do a copy and paste to make them their own layer. Once they are their own layer, make sure you rename that layer, and then go ahead and move your olives onto your cutting board. Finally, you are going to go down and you're going to take the purple salad sticker and you are going to add that on top of every single vegetable. The last thing we want to do is take our picture and get rid of all of the excess excess white and old vegetables around it. So instead of deleting everything off of the background layer, we're just going to use the crop tool over here. And if you click that, you're going to see that the edges of the whole canvas have marching ants and then these little corner pieces. And you can just click and drag those corner pieces in to wherever you would want your picture to start and end. So anything highlighted is going to be what's kept, and anything in gray is going to be what's cropped out. Just like a transformation, you need to choose to accept your crop or deny your crop. So make sure that you've cropped your picture to just your cutting board and your vegetables. Then, if you have all your vegetables and stickers as their own renamed layers, moved them onto the cutting board, transformed, and finally cropped your picture, make sure you save it as selectiontools.psd. So keep it as a Photoshop file so I can see your layers, and save that to your OneDrive Triton folder, Graphic Design, Unit 3, and finally submit that to Schoology for grading.
What can I say, Ron? The guy's a loser. I'll see you.
Loser.
Yeah.
Oh, sir, I thought some angry member of the kitchen staff. Did you not tip them? Oh, the terrorists, they ran that way. It was a run by fruiting. I'll get them, sir. Don't worry.